The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Montecito mansion as 5-year-old Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor sat at the breakfast table, swinging his legs that barely touched the floor. His mother, Megan, was preparing his favorite pancakes while his father, Harry, read the morning news on his tablet. Everything seemed perfectly normal until Megan turned around and gasped. "Harry," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and concern. "Look at Archie's hair." Harry looked up from his tablet, and his jaw dropped. Where once Archie had inherited his mother's dark brown locks, now brilliant copper-red strands were emerging, catching the sunlight like fire. The transformation wasn't complete, but it was unmistakable. The famous Windsor red hair was claiming its rightful place. "Daddy, why is Mommy looking at me funny?" Archie asked, his innocent voice cutting through the tension in the room. Harry set down his tablet and walked over to his son, kneeling beside his chair. He ran his fingers through Archie's changing hair, memories flooding back of his own childhood when strangers would point and whisper about the Ginger Prince. The weight of what this meant settled heavily on his shoulders. "Your hair is changing, buddy," Harry said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's becoming red, like mine." Archie's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? I'm going to look like you, Daddy?" The pure joy in his son's voice made Harry's heart ache. He remembered being teased mercilessly at school, the cruel nicknames, the constant attention from the media about his appearance. He had hoped his children might escape that particular burden. Megan joined them, her hand resting on Harry's shoulder. She could see the worry in her husband's eyes, understanding immediately what he was thinking. They had worked so hard to give their children a normal life, away from the constant scrutiny of the British press and royal protocol. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Megan told Archie, forcing a smile. "Red hair is very special." But later that evening, after Archie had gone to bed, Harry and Megan sat in their living room, the weight of the day's discovery heavy between them. Harry stared into the fireplace, his mind racing with memories and fears. "I know what you're thinking," Megan said quietly, curling up beside him on the couch. "Do you remember what they used to call me?" Harry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Spare. The Wild Child. The Ginger Prince who would never amount to anything." He turned to face his wife, his eyes filled with pain. "I don't want that for him, Meg. I don't want Archie to go through what I went through." Megan took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "But Archie isn't you, and this isn't the same situation. We've made different choices. We're raising him differently." Harry nodded, but the worry remained. He had seen how the media could twist anything into a story, how they could take an innocent child and turn them into tabloid fodder. The red hair would make Archie instantly recognizable as a Windsor, linking him forever to the royal family they had worked so hard to distance themselves from. The next few weeks brought subtle but noticeable changes. Archie's hair continued its transformation, each day revealing more of the vibrant red that had defined Harry's appearance for decades. The little boy was delighted with the change, often running to mirrors to admire his new look, completely unaware of the complex emotions it stirred in his parents. At the local preschool, Archie's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was the first outsider to notice the change. She had always been discreet about Archie's royal connections, treating him like any other child in her care. But the emerging red hair made it impossible to ignore who his father was. "Archie, your hair is getting so red and beautiful," she commented during art time, watching as several other children turned to stare. "My daddy has red hair too," Archie announced proudly to his classmates. "Mommy says it makes us special." One little girl, Emma, tilted her head curiously. "My mommy says red hair means you have no soul," she said innocently, repeating something she had heard at home. The comment hit like a physical blow, and Mrs. Patterson quickly intervened. "That's not true at all, Emma. Red hair is just a different color, like how some people have blue eyes and others have brown eyes." But the damage was done. Archie's face crumpled with confusion and hurt. "Mrs. Patterson, what's a soul?" That evening, when Harry came to pick up Archie, Mrs. Patterson pulled him aside to explain what had happened. Harry's face darkened as he listened, the old familiar anger rising in his chest. It was starting already, the comments, the stares, the casual cruelty that he remembered so well from his own childhood. "Thank you for handling it well," Harry said tightly. "I'll talk to him at home." During the drive home, Archie was unusually quiet, staring out the window at the passing scenery. Finally, he spoke up in a small voice. "Daddy, Emma said people with red hair don't have souls. Do I have a soul?" Harry had to pull over, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. This was exactly what he had feared, the moment when his son's innocence would be chipped away by ignorant comments and cruel children repeating things they had heard from adults who should know better. He turned in his seat to face Archie, whose big eyes were filled with confusion and worry. "Archie, listen to me very carefully," Harry said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "You have the biggest, brightest soul I've ever seen. Your red hair doesn't change that. It doesn't make you different or less than anyone else. Emma was wrong, and what she said was hurtful. But why did she say it if it's not true?" Harry sighed, searching for words that a 5-year-old could understand. "Sometimes people say mean things about things they don't understand. Red hair is beautiful and special, just like you are. I have red hair, and so does your Uncle William's children. We're part of a family that has had red hair for many, many years." Archie seemed to consider this, his small brow furrowed in concentration. "Are there other kids with red hair like me?" "Yes, buddy. Lots of them. And, you know what? Some of the most amazing people in the world have red hair. There are kings and queens, actors and singers, scientists and artists. Your hair color doesn't determine what you can become." When they arrived home, Megan immediately sensed something was wrong. Harry filled her in on the day's events while Archie played in the garden with their dogs. She watched their son through the window, her heart breaking for the challenges she knew lay ahead. "Maybe we should consider moving him to a different school," Megan suggested. "Somewhere more diverse, where he might not stand out as much." "Running away isn't the answer," Harry replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "We can't protect him from everything, and we can't hide who he is forever." That night, as they tucked Archie into bed, he looked up at his parents with serious eyes. "Daddy, can you tell me a story about red hair?" Harry smiled, settling into the chair beside Archie's bed. "Once upon a time, there was a little prince with the most beautiful red hair in all the kingdom. But some people didn't understand how special red hair was, so they would sometimes say mean things about it." "What did the prince do?" Archie asked, snuggling deeper into his blankets. "Well, the prince felt sad at first, just like you did today. But, then, he realized that his red hair was actually magic. It connected him to all the brave and wonderful people who had come before him, and it made him stronger. Every time someone said something mean, his hair would glow a little brighter, reminding him of all the people who loved him just the way he was." Archie's eyes were wide with wonder. "Does my hair have magic too?" "The most powerful magic of all," Harry said, leaning down to kiss his son's forehead. "The magic of being exactly who you're meant to be." As the weeks passed, the red hair continued to emerge more prominently. Family photos showed the dramatic change, and Harry couldn't help but be struck by how much Archie was beginning to resemble him at the same age. The same wild curls, the same bright eyes, the same mischievous smile that had gotten Harry into so much trouble as a child. One afternoon, while Archie was napping, Harry found himself looking through old photo albums. There he was at age 5, standing next to his brother William, both of them in matching outfits for a royal portrait. His red hair blazed against the formal backdrop, and he could almost feel the discomfort of that day, the way the photographers had fussed over getting his hair just right, the whispered comments about whether he looked royal enough. Megan found him there, surrounded by memories and looking troubled. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, settling beside him on the couch. Harry showed her the photo. "Look how miserable I look. I was always trying so hard to fit in, to be what everyone expected a prince to be. But the hair made me stand out whether I wanted to or not." "But you weren't miserable because of your hair," Megan pointed out gently. "You were miserable because of how people treated you because of it. That's what we need to change for Archie." Harry nodded, but the fear remained. He had seen how the British tabloids could take one physical characteristic and turn it into a lifetime of mockery. Headlines flashed through his memory: the Ginger Prince, Wild Child Harry, the Spare with the Flair. He had grown thick skin over the years, but Archie was just a little boy. "I keep thinking about that photo of me after my mother died," Harry said quietly. Walking behind her coffin, trying to be brave while the whole world watched. "The papers kept focusing on my hair, like it somehow made me less capable of grief, less deserving of sympathy." Meghan's heart ached for her husband, understanding now the depth of his fear. It wasn't just about teasing or comments. It was about how the red hair had made him a target for a lifetime of scrutiny, turning his most vulnerable moments into public spectacle. "We'll do better by him," she promised. "We'll teach him to be proud of who he is, and we'll surround him with people who see his worth, not just his appearance." That evening, they made a decision that would change everything. Instead of hiding Archie's transformation or treating it as something to be managed, they would celebrate it. They would arm their son with confidence and pride, starting from the very beginning. The first step was reaching out to other families with red-haired children. Meghan spent hours researching support groups and communities, finding stories of successful, confident redheads who had overcome the challenges and thrived. They also decided to be more open about their own family history. Harry began sharing stories about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had been known for her beautiful auburn hair as a young woman. He told Archie about famous redheads throughout history, from Winston Churchill to Vincent van Gogh. "Your hair connects you to so many amazing people," Harry explained during one of their bedtime conversations. "It's like you're part of a special club that spans the whole world and all of history." Archie listened with fascination, his young mind absorbing the idea that his changing appearance was something to be celebrated rather than hidden. The transformation wasn't just physical. As Archie's hair became more distinctly red, his personality seemed to grow bolder and more confident. Perhaps it was coincidence, or perhaps it was the positive reinforcement his parents were providing, but the shy little boy was becoming more outgoing and self-assured. At the playground one day, when another child commented on his weird hair color, Archie simply smiled and said, "My daddy says red hair is magic. Want to see?" He then proceeded to do a cartwheel, his red curls catching the sunlight as he spun. Meghan watched from a nearby bench, her heart swelling with pride. Their little boy was learning to own his uniqueness rather than apologize for it. But challenges remained. The media attention that had always surrounded their family intensified as paparazzi began to notice Archie's changing appearance. Long-lens photographs appeared in tabloids with headlines speculating about the royal gene asserting itself. Harry and Meghan made the difficult decision to increase their security and become even more selective about public appearances. They wanted Archie to have as normal a childhood as possible, but they also knew that his emerging resemblance to his father would make privacy increasingly difficult to maintain. One morning, over breakfast, Archie looked up from his cereal with a serious expression. "Daddy, are we hiding from the camera people because of my hair?" The question caught Harry off guard. They had tried to shield Archie from the reality of media attention, but their 5-year-old was more perceptive than they had realized. "We're not hiding because there's anything wrong with you or your hair," Harry explained carefully. "We're being careful because some people are very interested in our family, and we want to make sure you can grow up safely and happily." "But I like my red hair," Archie said firmly. "I don't want to hide it." Meghan exchanged a look with Harry across the table. Their son's confidence was both heartwarming and concerning. They wanted him to be proud of who he was, but they also knew that the world could be cruel to those who stood out. "You never have to hide who you are," Meghan assured him. "We just want to make sure that when people see you, they see all the wonderful things about you, not just your hair color." As summer approached, the family faced a new challenge. They had been invited to several high-profile events, and the question of Archie's public appearances became more pressing. The red hair was now impossible to ignore, and they knew that any photos would immediately go viral. Harry found himself caught between his desire to protect his son and his recognition that hiding would only make things worse in the long run. They needed to control the narrative before others did it for them. "What if we do a planned photo session?" Meghan suggested one evening as they discussed their options. Something casual and natural, where we can show Archie being a happy, normal kid who just happens to have beautiful red hair. Harry considered the idea. It went against every instinct he had developed over the years about protecting his family's privacy, but perhaps it was time for a different approach. We could donate the proceeds to a charity that supports children who are bullied for their appearance, he mused. Turn the attention into something positive. The decision wasn't made lightly, but, eventually, they agreed to a limited photo session with a trusted photographer. The images would show Archie playing naturally, his red hair catching the light as he laughed and ran through their garden. The night before the photo session, Harry sat on Archie's bed, looking down at his sleeping son. The red hair was now fully established, creating a beautiful halo around the little boy's peaceful face. He looked so much like Harry had at that age, but there was something different about him too, a confidence and security that Harry had never possessed as a child. I promise you'll have a different experience than I did, Harry whispered into the darkness. I promise we'll do better. As if sensing his father's presence, Archie stirred slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. In his dreams, perhaps he was flying through the air, his red hair streaming behind him like a banner of pride rather than a target for mockery. The photo session the next day exceeded everyone's expectations. Archie was natural and joyful in front of the camera, his personality shining as brightly as his hair. The resulting images were beautiful and heartwarming, showing a confident little boy who was clearly loved and cherished. When the photos were released to the public, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Comments poured in from around the world, with many red-haired individuals sharing their own stories and expressing support for the young prince. The narrative that Harry and Meghan had feared, one focused solely on appearance and royal genetics, was replaced by something more meaningful, a celebration of diversity and the beauty of being different. But perhaps the most important moment came that evening, when Archie looked at the photos on his mother's phone and grinned widely. I look just like you, Daddy, he said with pure delight, showing no self-consciousness or concern about the attention his appearance might attract. Harry pulled his son into a tight hug, realizing that somewhere along the way, they had succeeded in giving Archie something he himself had never had, the unshakable belief that he was perfect exactly as he was. As the first part of their journey came to a close, the family looked toward the future with cautious optimism. The red hair had emerged fully, marking Archie unmistakably as his father's son, but, more importantly, it had become a symbol of the confidence and self-acceptance they were determined to nurture in their child. The challenges weren't over, they would face many more difficult moments as Archie grew older and the world continued to watch. But they had laid a foundation of love and acceptance that would serve as armor against whatever came next. The little boy with the blazing red hair was ready to take on the world, secure in the knowledge that he was loved not in spite of his differences, but because of everything that made him uniquely himself. 3 years had passed since Archie's red hair first began to emerge, and, now at 8 years old, he had grown into a confident and spirited child whose copper locks had become his signature feature. The family had settled into a rhythm in Montecito, with Archie attending a progressive private school that celebrated diversity and individuality. But, as he entered 3rd grade, new challenges began to surface. The morning sun cast golden rays through the breakfast nook windows as Archie sat at the kitchen counter, methodically eating his toast while scrolling through photos on his tablet. He had discovered the internet's fascination with his family, particularly the endless comparisons between himself and his father at the same age. Look, Mom, Archie said, turning the tablet toward Meghan. This website has like 100 pictures of Dad when he was little, and they put them next to pictures of me. They say we look exactly the same. Meghan glanced at the screen and felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. The comparison photos were everywhere now, and, while some were meant to be sweet, others carried an undertone that made her uncomfortable. Comments ranged from innocent observations about genetics to more pointed remarks about royal bloodlines and Archie's destiny. What do you think about all this attention? Meghan asked carefully, studying her son's face for any sign of distress. Archie shrugged, seemingly unaffected. It's kind of cool, I guess. But I don't really understand why people care so much about hair color. Tommy Chin in my class has black hair like his dad, but nobody makes websites about it. His innocent observation highlighted the absurdity of the situation perfectly, but it also revealed that Archie was beginning to understand that he was treated differently from other children. Megan made a mental note to discuss this with Harry when he returned from his morning run. At school that day, Archie's teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, noticed that several children had been whispering and pointing during morning assembly. He had grown accustomed to managing the occasional disruption caused by Archie's famous parentage, but lately, the attention had intensified. During recess, a group of fifth graders approached Archie on the playground. Their leader, a tall boy named Connor, had been held back a year and took pleasure in intimidating younger students. "Hey, Prince Archie," Connor called out mockingly. "My mom says your family thinks they're too good for England. Is that why you're hiding here in America?" Archie looked up from the jungle gym where he had been playing with his friends. He had heard similar comments before, usually from adults who thought he couldn't understand their conversations. But this was the first time another child had directly confronted him about his family's decision to leave the UK. "We're not hiding," Archie replied calmly, his voice carrying the confidence his parents had worked so hard to instill in him. "We live here because my parents chose to. Just like your parents chose to live wherever they lived before." Connor stepped closer, encouraged by his friends snickering. "Yeah, but normal people's parents don't run away from being royal. My dad says your dad is a quitter who couldn't handle being a real prince." The words stung more than Archie expected. He had always been proud of his father, of the stories Harry told him about their life in England and the reasons they had chosen to build a new life in California. Hearing it described as running away and quitting planted seeds of doubt in his young mind. "My dad isn't a quitter," Archie said, his voice rising slightly. "He's brave. He fought in the army and he helps people." "Then, why isn't he still in England being a prince?" Connor pressed, sensing weakness. "Why does he make money talking about his family on TV instead of doing royal stuff?" Before Archie could respond, Mr. Rodriguez appeared, having noticed the confrontation from across the playground. "Connor, that's enough. Playground conversations should be about playground things. If you want to discuss current events, we can do that in social studies class." As Connor and his friends dispersed, Mr. Rodriguez knelt down beside Archie, who was trying hard not to let his emotions show. "You okay, buddy?" the teacher asked gently. Archie nodded, but his usual bright demeanor had dimmed. "Mr. Rodriguez, is my dad a quitter?" The question broke the teacher's heart. He had watched Archie navigate the challenges of his unique situation with remarkable grace, but he could see that the constant scrutiny was beginning to take its toll. "Archie, making difficult decisions about what's best for your family doesn't make someone a quitter," Mr. Rodriguez explained. "It makes them responsible. Your dad chose to put his family first, and that's actually pretty brave." That afternoon, when Harry arrived to pick up Archie, Mr. Rodriguez requested a brief conference. He explained the playground incident and his concerns about the increasing attention from other students and their families. "Archie handled it well," the teacher assured Harry. "But I can see it's weighing on him. Some of the other parents have been vocal about their opinions regarding your family's choices, and, unfortunately, their children are picking up on those attitudes." Harry's jaw tightened as he listened. This was exactly what he had feared when they decided to keep Archie in a traditional school setting rather than opting for private tutors. The real world was messy and often cruel, but he and Megan had believed it was important for their son to learn to navigate it early. "What would you recommend?" Harry asked. "Maybe it's time for a more proactive approach," Mr. Rodriguez suggested. "Instead of just responding to incidents as they happen, perhaps we could educate the class about different types of families and the valid reasons people make major life changes. Take some of the mystery and gossip out of the equation." During the drive home, Archie was unusually quiet, staring out the window as they passed the familiar sights of their neighborhood. Finally, he spoke up. "Dad, why did we really leave England?" Harry had been dreading this question while simultaneously preparing for it. Archie was old enough now to deserve a more complete answer than the simple explanations they had given him when he was younger. "That's a big question, buddy," Harry said, pulling into their driveway but making no move to get out of the car. The simple answer is that Mom and I wanted to raise you and your sister somewhere we could have more control over your privacy and safety. But the long answer? Archie pressed, displaying the persistence that reminded Harry so much of himself at that age. Harry turned in his seat to face his son, seeing not just the physical resemblance that everyone commented on, but the intelligence and emotional maturity that was uniquely Archie's. The long answer is that sometimes, even when you love your family very much, you have to make hard choices about what kind of life you want to live. Being part of the royal family comes with many wonderful things, but it also comes with rules and expectations that weren't right for our family. Archie considered this carefully. Did it have anything to do with my red hair? The question surprised Harry. What makes you ask that? I've been reading some of the stuff online, Archie admitted. Some people say mean things about red hair, and I know people used to say mean things about yours. I just wondered if that was part of why we left. Harry felt his heart break a little at his son's perceptiveness. At only 8 years old, Archie was already connecting dots that most adults missed. Your red hair is beautiful, and it had nothing to do with our decision to leave, Harry said firmly. But you're right that people sometimes say unkind things about it, and that's one of many reasons why we wanted to raise you somewhere we could protect you better. That evening, over dinner, the family discussed the day's events openly. Lilibet, now 5 years old, listened with wide eyes as her big brother recounted the playground confrontation. I don't understand why people are mean about hair, she said, unconsciously running her fingers through her own dark curls that showed no signs of the red gene. Some people are uncomfortable with anything that's different, Megan explained. And, unfortunately, red hair has been the target of jokes and stereotypes for a very long time. But why? Archie asked, genuinely puzzled. It's just a color. You're absolutely right, Harry said. It is just a color. But, throughout history, people have used physical differences as excuses to treat each other badly. Red hair, skin color, height, weight, none of these things should matter, but, sadly, sometimes they do to small-minded people. The conversation continued long into the evening, touching on topics of discrimination, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Both children listened intently, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated their growing understanding of the complexities of the adult world. Over the next few weeks, Archie's confidence seemed to waver for the first time since his red hair had emerged. He spent more time in his room, sometimes asking to stay home from school with vague complaints about stomach aches or headaches that Megan suspected were more emotional than physical. The breaking point came during a family outing to a local farmer's market. They had been enjoying a peaceful Saturday morning, browsing stalls and sampling fresh fruit, when a group of tourists recognized them. Within minutes, phones were out and cameras were clicking, despite the family's clear discomfort. Excuse me, one woman approached boldly, ignoring Harry and Meghan's polite attempts to maintain their privacy. Can I get a picture with the little prince? My daughter just loves his red hair. Before either parent could respond, the woman had positioned herself next to Archie, who stood frozen with uncertainty. The camera flashed, and, suddenly, they were surrounded by other people wanting photos, all commenting on Archie's appearance as if he were a tourist attraction rather than a child. Please respect our family's privacy, Harry said firmly, positioning himself between Archie and the crowd. Oh, come on, another tourist called out. He's a public figure. This is what you signed up for. The comments sparked others, and soon the family found themselves at the center of a heated debate about public figures, privacy rights, and the obligations that came with royal blood. Throughout it all, Archie remained silent, his face pale and his eyes wide with confusion and fear. Security eventually helped them leave the market, but the damage was done. During the car ride home, Archie finally broke down. I hate my hair, he sobbed, his small body shaking with the force of his emotions. I hate that people always want to take pictures of it. I hate that everyone talks about it like it's the only thing about me. Harry pulled over immediately, his own heart breaking as he watched his son's confidence crumble. This was his worst nightmare coming true, seeing Archie experience the same pain and frustration that had defined so much of his own childhood. I want normal hair like Tommy and Jake and everyone else in my class, Archie continued through his tears. I want people to see me, not my stupid red hair. Megan reached back from the passenger seat, taking Archie's hand in hers. "Oh, sweetheart, your hair isn't stupid. It's part of what makes you you." "But I don't want to be me if being me means people treat me like a zoo animal," Archie cried. The raw honesty of his words hit both parents like a physical blow. They had worked so hard to build his confidence, to teach him to embrace his uniqueness, but they hadn't fully prepared him for the reality of living in a world where that uniqueness would always make him a target for unwanted attention. That night, after Archie had cried himself to sleep, Harry and Meghan had a long and difficult conversation about their choices and their son's future. "Maybe we need to consider homeschooling," Meghan suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. "At least until he's older and better equipped to handle this kind of attention." "But then, we'd be doing exactly what that woman at the market suggested, hiding him away because of who he is," Harry replied. "That's not the lesson I want him to learn." They talked through options late into the night: different schools, therapy, media training, even the possibility of moving to a more remote location. But every solution felt like a compromise that would limit Archie's opportunities or reinforce the idea that his appearance was something to be ashamed of. The next morning brought an unexpected solution. Archie came downstairs with red-rimmed eyes but a determined expression. "I've been thinking," he announced to his parents, who were lingering over coffee and worry. "I don't want to hide from people who want to take pictures of my hair." Harry and Meghan exchanged surprised glances. This was not what they had expected from their 8-year-old after his breakdown the previous day. "What do you want to do instead?" Meghan asked gently. "I want to learn how to handle it better," Archie said with remarkable maturity. "Like you do, Dad. I've seen you with reporters and photographers, and you're always polite but firm. I want to learn how to do that." Harry felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. His son was asking to learn skills that no 8-year-old should need, but Harry couldn't deny that they would serve Archie well in the unique life he was destined to lead. "That's very brave of you," Harry said. "But are you sure? It means acknowledging that this attention probably isn't going to go away." Archie nodded seriously. "I know. But running away didn't work yesterday, and hiding won't work either. So I want to learn how to be strong like you and Mom." The decision to provide Archie with media training was not made lightly. Harry and Meghan consulted with child psychologists, educators, and trusted friends who understood the unique challenges their family faced. They wanted to ensure that they were empowering their son rather than forcing him to grow up too quickly. They found a specialist who worked with children of celebrities and public figures, someone who understood how to build confidence and resilience without crushing the natural joy and innocence of childhood. Dr. Sarah Martinez had a gentle approach that focused on building emotional intelligence and communication skills rather than creating a hardened public persona. "The goal isn't to turn Archie into a miniature adult," Dr. Martinez explained during their first consultation. "It's to give him tools that will help him maintain his authentic self while navigating public attention." The training sessions were carefully structured to feel like games and creative exercises rather than formal lessons. Archie learned breathing techniques for managing anxiety, practiced polite but firm responses to intrusive questions, and role-played scenarios he might encounter in public. One particularly effective exercise involved Archie pretending to be a nature documentary narrator, describing his own appearance with the same objective fascination he might use for a rare bird or interesting plant. The exercise helped him see his red hair as just one interesting fact about himself rather than the defining feature that others seemed to focus on. "Today we observe the 8-year-old Archie in his natural habitat," he would say in his best documentary voice, looking in the mirror. "Notice the distinctive copper-colored plumage on top of his head. This coloring is common in his family group and helps identify him as a member of the Windsor species. However, the most interesting feature of this young specimen is his curiosity about the world around him and his kindness toward others." The exercise always made him giggle, and, gradually, it helped him develop a healthier relationship with his appearance. Instead of seeing his red hair as a burden or a source of unwanted attention, he began to view it as just one part of a larger, more complex person. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan worked on their own approach to the situation. They realized that their anxiety about Archie's experiences was sometimes making things worse for him. Children pick up on their parents' emotions more than adults realize, and their fear about his future had been transmitting itself to him. We need to model the confidence we want him to have, Meghan observed during one of their evening debriefs. If we're constantly worried about how people will react to his hair, he's going to internalize that worry. They made a conscious effort to speak positively about Archie's appearance and to celebrate the things that made him unique. They also became more proactive about controlling narratives, sharing carefully curated family photos that showed Archie engaged in normal childhood activities rather than leaving his public image entirely to paparazzi shots and speculation. The change in approach began to pay dividends. At school, Archie's renewed confidence was apparent to everyone around him. When Connor, the older boy who had taunted him earlier, made another snide comment about fake princes, Archie responded with calm authority. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said simply. "But I'm proud of my family and proud of who I am. If you want to talk about something interesting, I learned how to code a simple video game yesterday. Want to see?" The response completely disarmed Connor, who had been expecting anger or tears. Instead, he found himself genuinely curious about Archie's coding project, and the conversation shifted to something productive and positive. Mr. Rodriguez, who witnessed the exchange, was amazed at the transformation in his student. The anxious, withdrawn child from a few weeks ago had been replaced by someone who radiated quiet confidence and genuine self-assurance. The real test came during the school's annual science fair, where Archie had prepared a presentation about genetics and inherited traits. He had chosen the topic partly because of his own experience with inheriting his father's red hair, but he approached it with scientific curiosity rather than personal defensiveness. Inherited traits are characteristics that are passed down from parents to children through genes, Archie explained to the panel of parent judges, his red hair catching the light under the display board. Some traits, like eye color and hair color, are easy to see. Others, like personality traits or talents, are harder to identify but just as real. One of the judges, clearly recognizing him, asked, "So you inherited your red hair from your father?" "Yes," Archie replied confidently. "But I also inherited his love of helping people and my mother's curiosity about the world. Those traits are probably more important than my hair color, don't you think?" The judge smiled, clearly impressed by the young boy's poise and insight. "I think you're absolutely right." As the spring semester progressed, Archie's social confidence continued to grow. He made new friends who were drawn to his kindness and humor rather than his famous parentage. He joined the school's soccer team, where his red hair flying in the wind as he ran became a badge of distinction rather than a source of embarrassment. The team's coach, a former professional player himself, took Archie under his wing and helped him channel his natural athleticism and competitive spirit. On the soccer field, Archie was just another kid trying his best, sweating and laughing with his teammates. "You know what I love about soccer?" Archie told his father after a particularly good practice. "Nobody cares what color your hair is when you're running fast and kicking the ball well." Harry smiled, remembering his own love of sports as an escape from the pressures of royal life. "Sports have a way of showing what really matters," he agreed. The season culminated in a championship game that drew a larger crowd than usual, partly because word had spread about the young prince on the team. Harry and Meghan attended, sitting in the stands like any other parents, cheering for their son and his teammates. When Archie scored the winning goal in the final minutes, his celebration was pure joy, arms raised, red hair wild, face beaming with accomplishment. The crowd erupted in cheers, and, for a moment, he was just a kid who had helped his team win, not a prince or a celebrity or a subject of media fascination. After the game, as teammates and families celebrated on the field, a local reporter approached Archie for a comment. Instead of the anxiety that might have overwhelmed him months earlier, Archie handled the situation with the skills Dr. Martinez had helped him develop. "I'm really proud of my team," he said simply. "We worked hard all season, and it feels amazing to win together. Soccer is about teamwork, not individual achievements." When the reporter tried to ask about his famous family, Archie politely redirected. "Today is about soccer and my teammates. If you want to write a story, I think it should be about how hard everyone worked." The reporter, charmed by the young boy's media savvy and genuine team spirit, ended up writing exactly that kind of story, one that focused on sportsmanship and dedication rather than celebrity gossip. That night, as the family celebrated with ice cream and replayed the highlights of the game, Archie reflected on how much had changed since his breakdown at the farmer's market. "I think I'm starting to understand something," he told his parents thoughtfully. "People are always going to notice my red hair first because it's bright and unusual. But what they remember about me depends on what I do after they notice it." Megan felt tears prick her eyes at her son's wisdom. At only 8 years old, he was learning lessons about character and authenticity that many adults never mastered. "That's exactly right," Harry said, pulling his son into a hug. "Your hair gets their attention, but your character is what matters." As summer approached and the school year drew to a close, the family began planning for new challenges and opportunities. Archie would be entering 4th grade in the fall, and with it would come new academic pressures and social dynamics. But they faced the future with confidence, armed with the knowledge that their son was developing the emotional tools he would need to navigate his unique path through life. The red hair that had once seemed like such a burden was becoming a source of strength and identity. Archie was learning that being different wasn't something to hide from or apologize for, it was something to embrace and use as a foundation for building character and resilience. Looking back on the challenges they had faced and overcome, Harry realized that his greatest fear, that Archie would experience the same pain and isolation that had marked his own childhood, had not come to pass. Not because they had protected their son from difficulty, but because they had taught him how to face it with confidence and grace. The journey was far from over, and there would certainly be more obstacles ahead. But, as Harry watched his 8-year-old son planning soccer drills for summer practice, his red hair catching the afternoon light as he concentrated on his notebook, he felt something he had never experienced about his own distinctive appearance: pure, uncomplicated pride. At 12 years old, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor stood before his bedroom mirror, carefully combing his now thick and vibrant red hair. The awkward transition period of childhood was giving way to the early signs of adolescence, and his resemblance to his father had become so striking that even casual observers would do double takes when they saw him in public. Middle school had brought new challenges that went far beyond playground teasing or curious stares. Now, in 7th grade, Archie was navigating the complex social hierarchies of teenage life while carrying the additional burden of his famous heritage and unmistakable appearance. "Archie, breakfast." Megan's voice carried up the stairs, interrupting his morning routine. He grabbed his backpack and bounded down the stairs, his red hair catching the morning light streaming through the kitchen windows. At the breakfast table, his sister Lilibet was already eating her cereal while scrolling through her tablet, and their parents were discussing the day's schedule. "Don't forget you have soccer practice after school," Harry reminded him. "Coach Martinez wants to talk to the team about the upcoming tournament." Archie nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The tournament would bring scouts from high school programs, and he knew that meant more attention, more photographs, and more opportunities for his athletic achievements to be overshadowed by his parentage. At school, Archie had found his place among a tight-knit group of friends who valued loyalty and authenticity over social status. There was Marcus, whose family had immigrated from Nigeria and who shared Archie's love of soccer; Sophia, a brilliant artist whose Mexican heritage meant she understood something about being seen as different in their predominantly white school; and David, a quiet boy whose parents were divorced and who appreciated Archie's lack of drama despite his famous background. The four of them sat together at lunch, discussing everything from homework to weekend plans to their shared frustration with the way some of their classmates seemed to treat them as curiosities rather than individuals. "I swear, sometimes I think people expect me to speak with a British accent just because of who my dad is," Archie said, unwrapping his sandwich. "Like I'm some kind of stereotype come to life." Sophia laughed. "Try having people assume you're in ESL classes because you're Latina, even though you were born here and speak better English than half the kids in honors classes. Or having people touch your hair without permission because they've never felt African texture before," Marcus added, unconsciously smoothing his own closely cropped curls. David nodded quietly. "At least you guys have obvious things for people to focus on. They just assume I'm damaged goods because my parents split up." It was a conversation they had variations of regularly, four kids who had learned to bond over the experience of being reduced to their most obvious characteristics by a world that seemed incapable of seeing beyond surface appearances. The discussion was interrupted by the approach of Madison Parker, one of the most popular girls in their grade, flanked by her usual entourage of followers. Madison had been trying to get Archie's attention since the beginning of the school year, not because she was particularly interested in him as a person, but because she was fascinated by the idea of dating someone famous. "Hey, Archie," Madison said with the kind of bright smile that never quite reached her eyes. "My mom was wondering if you'd like to come to my birthday party next weekend. It's going to be really exclusive, just family, friends, and special people." Archie glanced at his friends, who were all trying not to roll their eyes too obviously. Madison had never shown any interest in talking to him before she learned about his background, and her definition of special people always seemed to correlate directly with social status or fame. "That's really nice of you to think of me," Archie said politely, "but I already have plans with my friends that weekend." Madison's smile faltered slightly. "Oh. Well, maybe you could change your plans? I mean, there are going to be some really important people there. My mom knows some people in entertainment, and she thought you might enjoy meeting them." The offer was clearly meant to be tempting, but it had the opposite effect on Archie. The idea that he would be interested in meeting important people simply because of their status showed how little Madison understood about what actually mattered to him. "Thanks, but I'm good," Archie said firmly. "I hope you have a great party though." As Madison and her friends walked away, looking confused and slightly offended, Sophia grinned at Archie. "I love that you have absolutely zero interest in playing the celebrity game." "It's weird," Archie mused. "Some people expect me to act like I think I'm better than everyone else because of my family, and other people expect me to be grateful for any attention because they think it validates my existence. Nobody just wants to treat me like a regular person." This was the central tension of Archie's adolescent experience. Unlike his elementary school years, when the challenge had been learning to cope with unwanted attention, middle school brought the more complex challenge of navigating relationships where his background was always a factor, even when people tried to pretend it wasn't. Some classmates were intimidated by him, assuming he was stuck up or entitled despite all evidence to the contrary. Others, like Madison, were drawn to him for all the wrong reasons, seeing him as a social accessory rather than a friend. And then, there were those who went out of their way to treat him badly, as if knocking him down a peg would somehow balance the cosmic scales of privilege. The most difficult situation involved his English teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who seemed to have a particular problem with what she perceived as Archie's advantages in life. Despite his genuine effort and solid performance in her class, she frequently made comments that felt pointed and personal. "It's interesting how some people can coast through life on their family name rather than their own merit," she had said during a class discussion about privilege and literature, her eyes fixed meaningfully on Archie. The comment stung because it was so unfair. Archie worked hard in all his classes, participated actively in discussions, and had never once mentioned his family background or asked for special treatment. But Mrs. Henderson seemed determined to view everything he did through the lens of perceived privilege. The situation came to a head during a group project about social justice movements. Archie had been paired with 3 other students to research and present on civil rights activism, and he had thrown himself into the research with genuine enthusiasm. The topic genuinely interested him, partly because of conversations he had at home about his mother's experiences with discrimination and his father's advocacy work. When it came time for presentations, Archie's group delivered what they thought was a solid, well-researched analysis of the Montgomery bus boycott. But Mrs. Henderson's feedback was harsh and seemed to target Archie specifically. "Mr. Mountbatten Windsor," she said in front of the entire class, "I find it ironic that someone from your background would choose to present on civil rights, given your family's history of institutional privilege. Perhaps next time you might consider how your perspective might limit your understanding of real struggle." The classroom fell silent, and Archie felt heat rise in his cheeks. The criticism wasn't just unfair, it was cruel and designed to humiliate him in front of his peers. Worse, it reduced his genuine interest in social justice to nothing more than performative gesture based on his family background. "I researched this topic because I think it's important," Archie said quietly, his voice steady despite his embarrassment. "Not because of who my family is, but because I believe in treating people fairly regardless of their background." "How noble," Mrs. Henderson replied with barely concealed sarcasm. That afternoon, Archie came home visibly upset for the first time in months. Harry found him in the backyard, throwing a soccer ball against the fence with more force than necessary. Rough day? Harry asked, settling onto the patio steps beside his son. Archie caught the ball and slumped down next to his father. Mrs. Henderson hates me. That's a strong word. What happened? Archie recounted the classroom incident, his voice growing more emotional as he described the humiliation of being called out in front of his classmates. Harry listened with growing anger, recognizing the kind of adult prejudice that he had hoped his children might be spared. She made it sound like I'm not allowed to care about important things because of who my family is, Archie finished. Like everything I do is fake or doesn't count because of my last name. Harry was quiet for a long moment, remembering his own experiences with adults who had projected their own issues and prejudices onto him because of his royal background. The irony was that Mrs. Henderson was doing exactly what she accused others of doing, making assumptions about someone based on their background rather than their character or actions. You know what the hardest part about this situation is? Harry said finally. What? She's supposed to be teaching you about fairness and critical thinking, but she's demonstrating the exact opposite. She's letting her preconceptions override her ability to see you as an individual. That evening, Harry and Meghan discussed whether to address the situation directly with the school administration. They had always tried to let Archie handle social challenges on his own when possible, but this felt like something beyond what a 12-year-old should have to navigate alone. The problem is, Meghan observed, if we intervene, it might make things worse for him. Mrs. Henderson might see it as proof that he runs to his parents when things get difficult. But, if we don't intervene, she might continue to target him, Harry countered. And, other kids will see that it's acceptable to treat him unfairly. The solution came from an unexpected source, Archie himself. The next day, he approached Mrs. Henderson after class with a request that surprised everyone involved. Mrs. Henderson, he said respectfully, I was wondering if I could talk to you about yesterday's class. The teacher looked wary but agreed to listen. I think maybe you and I got off on the wrong foot, Archie continued. I'm not sure why you don't like me, but I'd really like to understand what I've done wrong so I can fix it. The directness of the question caught Mrs. Henderson off guard. She had expected defensiveness or entitlement, not genuine curiosity and a desire to improve their relationship. I don't dislike you personally, she said, her hostility wavering slightly. But I worry about students who might think their family connections give them advantages they haven't earned. But I've never asked for advantages, Archie pointed out. I do all the same work as everyone else, and I've never mentioned my family in class unless it was relevant to the topic. If I've somehow given you the impression that I think I'm better than other people, I honestly don't know how, but I'd like to change that. The conversation continued for several minutes, and, while it didn't completely resolve their issues, it opened a dialogue that had been missing. Mrs. Henderson began to realize that her assumptions about Archie were based more on her own prejudices than on his actual behavior, and Archie learned valuable lessons about advocating for himself in difficult situations. The incident also strengthened his friendships with Marcus, Sophia, and David, who had watched him handle an unfair situation with dignity and courage. They began to seek his advice when they faced their own challenges with prejudiced teachers or classmates, recognizing that his experience navigating bias, even when it came from a different source than their own, had given him useful insights. As winter turned to spring, Archie's soccer skills continued to develop, and his red hair became something of a trademark on the field. Opponents learned to watch for the flash of copper racing down the sideline, and his teammates would joke that he was easy to spot when they needed to pass the ball. The state tournament brought the highest level of competition Archie had ever faced, along with the largest crowds and most intense media attention. College scouts were in the stands, and several sports journalists had started following the team because of Archie's presence. Before the championship game, Coach Martinez pulled Archie aside for a private conversation. I want you to know, the coach said, that you've earned your place on this team through hard work and talent, not because of who your father is. But, today, there are going to be cameras and reporters here who might try to make this about something other than soccer. Archie nodded, understanding the subtext. This was his chance to prove that his athletic abilities could stand on their own merit, separate from his famous parentage. Just play your game, Coach Martinez continued. Let your skills do the talking. The match was intense from the first whistle. The opposing team had clearly studied Archie's playing style and were marking him closely, trying to neutralize his speed and ball-handling abilities. But months of training and natural athleticism served him well, and he adapted his game to work around their defensive strategy. In the second half, with his team trailing by 1 goal, Archie found himself in position for what coaches call a moment of truth, a breakaway opportunity with only the goalkeeper between him and a potential game-tying goal. As he raced toward the goal, his red hair streaming behind him like a banner, the crowd rose to their feet in anticipation. The goalkeeper made an excellent save on Archie's first shot, but the ball rebounded directly to Marcus, who was following the play perfectly. Marcus scored easily, and the team erupted in celebration. In the moment of pure joy that followed, Archie's first instinct was to find his teammate who had scored the goal rather than feeling disappointed about his own missed opportunity. The gesture, captured by photographers and shared widely on social media, showed a level of sportsmanship and team-first mentality that impressed even veteran sports commentators. Here was a young athlete who understood that individual glory meant nothing compared to team success. The game went to overtime, then to penalty kicks, where Archie's calmness under pressure proved decisive. When his turn came to take a penalty shot, with the championship hanging in the balance, he approached the ball with the same quiet confidence he had learned to apply to all aspects of his public life. The shot was perfect, low, hard, and precisely placed in the corner of the goal where no goalkeeper could reach it. As the net bulged and his teammates rushed to celebrate, Archie raised his arms in triumph, his red hair wild and his face beaming with accomplishment. Later, when reporters asked him about the pressure of taking such an important penalty kick, Archie gave an answer that would be quoted in sports magazines for months afterward: "Pressure is just another word for an opportunity to show what you're capable of. My dad taught me that you can't control what other people expect of you, but you can control how prepared you are and how much effort you give." Today, our whole team was prepared and we gave everything we had. The victory celebration continued into the evening, with families gathering at a local restaurant to commemorate the championship. As Archie sat surrounded by his teammates and their families, his red hair still damp with sweat from the game, he felt a deep sense of belonging that had nothing to do with his famous last name. "You know what I realized today?" he told his parents as they drove home later that night. "What's that?" Megan asked. "All those times when I was younger and I wished I had different hair so people wouldn't notice me. I think I was wrong. Being noticeable isn't the problem. The problem is when people stop looking after they notice you, when they think they already know everything about you because of how you look." Harry glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, struck by the maturity of the observation. "That's very wise. What changed your mind?" "Today, everyone could see my red hair, but they were also seeing me play soccer and be a good teammate and handle pressure well. I think maybe the hair just makes it easier for people to remember the other stuff about me, if I make sure the other stuff is worth remembering." It was a profound shift in perspective that marked Archie's transition from childhood into adolescence. Instead of seeing his distinctive appearance as a burden to be managed or overcome, he was beginning to view it as an opportunity to demonstrate his character and abilities more memorably. As they pulled into their driveway, past the security gates and cameras that were a constant reminder of their public life, Archie felt more confident about his future than he ever had before. The red hair that had once made him feel different and exposed now felt like a part of his identity that he could be proud of, not because it connected him to royal heritage, but because it had taught him resilience, authenticity, and the importance of defining himself through his actions rather than his appearance. The journey toward adulthood would bring new challenges, but Archie was beginning to understand that his distinctive appearance had given him something valuable: the opportunity to learn early in life that true confidence comes not from blending in, but from being authentically yourself in a world that often prefers conformity. Looking ahead to high school and beyond, Archie knew there would be more moments when his red hair would attract attention, both positive and negative. But he no longer feared those moments. Instead, he saw them as opportunities to show the world who he really was beneath the copper curls that had become his trademark. The 12-year-old boy who fell asleep that night, his championship medal on his nightstand and his red hair tousled against the pillow, had learned one of life's most important lessons: that being different isn't a disadvantage to overcome, but an advantage to embrace wisely. And, with that understanding, he was ready for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. At 16, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor had grown into his red hair the way some people grow into their hands or feet. It no longer seemed too big or too noticeable for the rest of him. Standing 6 feet tall with the lean build of a natural athlete, his copper curls had darkened slightly with age but remained unmistakably vibrant under any light. What had once made him feel different now made him feel distinguished. The private high school in Montecito buzzed with the usual teenage energy as students prepared for graduation. Archie, now a junior, found himself in the unique position of being simultaneously one of the most recognizable students on campus and one of the most respected. His journey from the anxious 8-year-old who had cried about his changing appearance to the confident teenager he had become was evident in everything he did. In the student council meeting room, Archie sat with his fellow officers planning the upcoming spring formal. As student body president, he had campaigned on a platform of inclusion and authentic representation, values that had grown directly from his own experiences with being seen as different. The theme should be something that celebrates what makes us unique, suggested Emma Chen, the vice president and one of Archie's closest friends since middle school. Too many school dances try to make everyone fit into the same mold. I like that, agreed James Rodriguez, the treasurer. What about embrace your truth or something along those lines? Archie nodded thoughtfully, his red hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the conference room windows. What if we made it more interactive? Instead of just having a theme, what if we created spaces for people to actually share what makes them proud to be themselves? It was typical of Archie to turn a simple dance planning session into an opportunity for deeper connection and understanding. His experiences had taught him that surface-level celebrations often missed the point. What mattered was creating genuine opportunities for people to be seen and valued for who they truly were. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Mrs. Patterson, the principal, entered with a serious expression that immediately put everyone on alert. "Archie, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" she asked. In her office, Mrs. Patterson explained that the school had received a request from a major television network to film a documentary segment about Archie's high school experience. The proposed focus would be on how he had navigated adolescence while managing his unique public profile. "They're particularly interested in the relationship between your appearance, your red hair, and your development as a leader and athlete," Mrs. Patterson explained. The producer specifically mentioned wanting to explore how physical attributes can become sources of strength rather than insecurity. Archie listened carefully, his mind already working through the implications. At 16, he had developed a sophisticated understanding of media narratives and the way his story could be used to serve different purposes. "What's my family's involvement in this?" he asked. They would need their permission, obviously, but the network approached the school directly. "They seem to want your perspective as a young adult rather than filtering everything through your parents' experiences." That evening at dinner, Archie brought up the documentary proposal with his family. Harry and Meghan exchanged the kind of look that parents share when they realize their child is facing a decision that will require adult-level judgment. "What's your initial reaction?" Meghan asked, cutting into her grilled salmon. "Honestly? Part of me is curious about the opportunity to control my own narrative for once," Archie said. "I've been the subject of stories my whole life, but I've never really gotten to tell my own story." Lilibet, now 13 and dealing with her own adolescent challenges, looked up from her phone. "Would they want to interview me too? Because I have some opinions about growing up in this family." "This would be specifically about Archie's experience," Harry explained. "But, Lee, what are your opinions? We don't talk about this stuff enough as a family." What followed was one of the most honest conversations the family had ever had about the unique pressures and privileges of their situation. Lilibet shared her own struggles with living in Archie's shadow, feeling like the normal child whose brown hair and less obviously royal appearance made her somehow less interesting to the outside world. "Sometimes I feel invisible next to Archie," she admitted. "Not because he tries to overshadow me, but because people are always so focused on his red hair and what it represents that they forget I'm part of this family too." The observation was painful but important. It highlighted how Archie's distinctive appearance, while making his own life more complicated, had also shaped his sister's experience in ways the family hadn't fully recognized. "I never thought about it that way," Archie said quietly.
I've been so focused on dealing with attention that I didn't realize it might be hard for you to get attention when you want it.
The conversation continued late into the evening, touching on topics they had never discussed so openly: the burden of representation, the question of whether their choices about privacy had been the right ones, and what each of them hoped for in terms of their future relationship with public life. Ultimately, Archie decided to decline the documentary opportunity, but not for the reasons his parents expected. "I want to tell my story someday," he explained. "But I want to wait until I've actually accomplished something meaningful beyond just surviving adolescence as a famous kid. Right now, the most interesting thing about me is still my red hair and my family background. I want to wait until I've done something that matters on its own." The decision reflected a level of self-awareness and strategic thinking that impressed even Harry, who had learned similar lessons the hard way through years of trial and error with media relationships. Spring brought new challenges and opportunities. Archie's soccer skills had continued to develop, and he was now receiving serious interest from college recruiters. The combination of his athletic ability and his high-profile background made him an attractive prospect for programs that valued both talent and the media attention that came with notable students. The recruiting process was delicate because Archie wanted to be evaluated purely on his soccer abilities, while college coaches inevitably factored in the publicity benefits of having him on their team. Finding programs that could see him as an athlete first and a celebrity second required careful research and honest conversations. Coach Williams, who had taken over the high school team when Archie was a freshman, had become both a mentor and an advocate in the recruiting process. A former college player himself, he understood the balance between athletic development and managing outside pressures. "The programs that are genuinely interested in you as a player will focus their conversations on your game," Coach Williams explained during one of their regular mentoring sessions. "The ones that spend too much time talking about media opportunities or your family background probably aren't the right fit." One particular college visit stood out as an example of how to handle the recruiting process well. Stanford University, which had been recruiting Archie for both academics and soccer, structured his visit around meeting professors, sitting in on classes, and training with the team. His red hair drew some attention on campus, but the focus remained on his potential contributions as a student and athlete. "We're interested in Archie because he's shown leadership abilities and academic excellence alongside his soccer skills," the admissions officer explained to Harry and Meghan during a parent meeting. "The fact that he's learned to handle public attention gracefully is just a bonus that suggests he can manage the pressures of college life successfully." It was exactly the kind of evaluation Archie had hoped for, one that acknowledged his unique background without making it the primary consideration. The recruiting process also brought unexpected personal growth. During visits to different campuses, Archie found himself in conversations with other student athletes who had their own stories of overcoming challenges and assumptions based on their appearances or backgrounds. At UCLA, he met a basketball player who had faced discrimination because of his height and race. At Duke, he connected with a tennis player whose wealthy family background had made other students assume she was entitled and lazy. Each conversation reinforced his understanding that everyone carried some burden of other people's expectations and assumptions. "The thing I've learned," Archie told his parents after returning from a particularly meaningful campus visit, "is that everyone has something that makes other people think they know who you are before they actually get to know you. Red hair, skin color, height, accent, family background, whatever. The key is making sure that the assumptions don't become reality." As junior year drew to a close, Archie faced a decision that would define his immediate future: whether to graduate early and enter college at 17, or to complete his senior year and enter college at the traditional age of 18. The early graduation option was appealing because it would allow him to begin college soccer a year sooner, potentially giving him an advantage in terms of athletic development. But it would also mean leaving behind the high school experiences he had come to value, including his leadership roles and the friendships he had built. The decision became more complex when his girlfriend, Sarah, expressed concerns about the timing. Sarah Martinez was the daughter of his former media coach, Dr. Martinez, and she had grown up understanding the unique challenges of his situation. Their relationship, which had developed gradually over 2 years, was one of the most stable and positive aspects of Archie's teenage experience. "I support whatever you decide," Sarah told him during one of their long walks on the beach. But I want to make sure you're not rushing into college just to escape high school.
You've actually created something really good here." She was right.
Despite all the challenges and complications of his early years, Archie had managed to build a high school experience that felt authentic and meaningful. He was genuinely respected by his peers, had developed strong relationships with teachers, and was using his platform as student body president to make positive changes. The decision became clear during the spring soccer season, when Archie realized he wasn't ready to leave behind the team he had helped build and the younger players he was mentoring. His red hair flying as he ran down the field during practice, he understood that rushing toward the future would mean abandoning responsibilities he had taken on in the present. "I want to finish my senior year," he announced to his family over dinner.
"There are things I want to accomplish here before I move on."
The summer between junior and senior year brought a new level of media attention as Archie's college decision approached and his 18th birthday loomed. Photographers had become more aggressive about capturing images of him, and social media speculation about his future plans intensified. One particular incident highlighted how much Archie had grown in his ability to handle public attention. During a family vacation in Europe, their first trip back to the continent since leaving England, paparazzi followed them relentlessly. At a restaurant in Paris, photographers positioned themselves outside the windows, creating a disturbing spectacle that made other diners uncomfortable. Instead of ignoring the situation or letting it ruin their evening, Archie excused himself from the table, walked outside, and addressed the photographers directly. "I understand you have jobs to do," he said calmly, his red hair bright under the streetlights. "But you're making other families uncomfortable, and this is supposed to be a private dinner. If you want photos of me, I'll pose for a few pictures now, but then I'd appreciate it if you'd give us some space to enjoy our evening." The direct approach caught the photographers off guard. Most celebrities either ignored them completely or became hostile, but Archie's reasonable request and willingness to cooperate briefly made their job easier while establishing clear boundaries. He posed for a few photos, answered a couple of harmless questions about his college plans, and then returned to the restaurant. The photographers, having gotten what they needed, dispersed without further incident.
"That was remarkably mature," Harry sighed.